The fastest way to lose $18,000 in 2026 is to buy a used pontoon for 14. That math is public, and almost nobody runs it. The cheapest pontoons listed on Boat Trader start at $9,573. A new 150 horsepower Yamaha or Mercury hung on a boat that already exists ran $15,000 to $18,000 installed as of May this year. That is the trap, and the reason those two numbers now sit on opposite sides of each other has almost nothing to do with the boat you are looking at. Run it against a real listing. The average used pontoon on the American market right now is priced at $46,344. Call yours cheaper than average. Say you find a clean 22-footer from the boom years at $22,000, you buy it in March, and it starts on the first turn every weekend of your first season. Season 2, the engine goes, not all at once. It just starts costing money a little at a time, and then the shop calls you back with a number. What comes back is a repower quote. The mechanic looked at the year, the hours, and the rust, and told you the truth. That quote lands between $15,000 and $18,000 for a 150 horsepower 4-stroke installed. The shops that do this work for a living say that anything much below that range is a quote with something left out of it. So you now own a $22,000 boat with an $18,000 bill attached, and when you sell, the market will not pay you $40,000, it will pay you roughly what it paid before, about $22,000. 6 years ago, nobody was running that math. Pontoons were the growth story of American boating. By the industry's own count at the end of the 2010s, the category had grown about 11% a year since 2010, faster than the rest of the powerboat market. In 2024 alone, somewhere between 52,000 and 55,000 new pontoons were sold in the United States. They were the default family boat, the entry ticket, the thing you bought when the kids were old enough to sit still. Look at what the listings say now. On Boat Trader, pontoons run from $9,573 at the bottom to $238,622 at the top. The average used pontoon listing sits at $46,344. The low end of the used market starts at $9,984. That is a gap of more than $200,000 inside one type of boat on hulls built around the same 2 or 3 aluminum tubes and the same deck. And the volume is going the wrong way. According to the National Marine Manufacturers Association, over the 12 months through February of 2026, new powerboat sales in the United States fell 8.8% to 214,115 boats. Personal watercraft dropped 10.8%. Pontoons dropped 12.5%. Through January, the pontoon figure was 13%. Pontoons are falling faster than the market they helped build. And that is not the number that should worry you. Because a falling sales figure only tells you that fewer people are buying new. It says nothing about the ones already built, already registered, and sitting on a lift waiting for a season nobody has planned for. That number is not published anywhere. Almost nobody explains this part at the dock. A pontoon is 3 things bolted together. They wear out at completely different speeds. The first is the tubes. Aluminum logs, sealed, sitting in fresh water, in a lake, cared for properly, those things last almost forever. 20 years, 30. They outlive the person who bought them. The second is the deck and the furniture. Plywood screwed down to the crossbars with carpet or vinyl glued on top, foam and marine vinyl on every seat. That system has a life measured in single-digit years. The third is the engine. It is the most expensive single item on the boat, and it is the only part with its own resale market, separate from the boat itself. Now lay the value drop over the top of that. A new pontoon usually loses between 20 and 30% of its value across its first year or two. Another 10 to 20% comes off after that. From year 5 through year 10, the drop levels out to roughly 10 to 15% a year. Compare that against a center console, which loses 7 to 9% a year and is the steadiest boat on the used market. Which means the collapse you are watching in used pontoon prices is only half a collapse. The deck and the furniture are falling while the engine holds. That is part of the answer. It is true and it is not enough. The clock was already running before anybody heard it. Start with the deck because it is the part you cannot see. Epoxy Works, the technical journal put out by the makers of West System Marine Epoxy, describes a pontoon deck plainly. It is a layer of plywood screwed to the top of the frame, usually with carpet or vinyl glued on. Water gets in through the raw edge of the wood beside every screw holding that floor down and through every bolt holding down the seats, the coolers, and the hardware. Once the plywood starts coming apart in layers, the deck goes soft under your feet. Their account of how fast this happens is worth sitting with. Their technical staff report fixing boats less than 5 years old with the problem already there. 5 years. That is one warranty and one owner. Yard quotes from owners and from the shops doing the work put a full deck rebuild at $3,000 to $5,500, and those shops say the same thing every time. If the floor is rotten, the frame under it usually is too, so the number moves. Then the seats. Recovering the seats on a pontoon runs $2,000 to $10,000. Shop work runs $600 to $1,200 per seat, with marine vinyl priced around $40 to $60 per square yard. In hard sun states like Florida, pontoon owners redo their seats every 5 to 7 years, not because they want to, because the vinyl cracks and the seams split. So, before you have touched the engine, a 10-year-old pontoon carries a repair bill somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000 just to bring the deck and the seating back to sound. And you have a season, maybe two, before that bill shows up. Now, the engine, because this is where the numbers get ugly, a full outboard repower means the engine, the control cables, the throttle and shift, the wiring, the steering, and a basic gauge update. Priced properly, a 150 horsepower Yamaha or Mercury lands at $15,000 to $18,000 installed. Across the horsepower range, the working number is roughly $200 to $450 per horsepower for the total installed cost. Shop labor runs $140 to $185 an hour in most of the country, and over $200 in South Florida and the Northeast. A simple repower runs 40 to 70 hours of shop time. Hard ones go past 120. Rigging is where the quotes blow up. A repower that should cost $18,000 becomes $24,000 once the shop opens it up and finds rusted steering, a fuel tank that will not pass, or a transom that has to be built up before a heavier, modern four-stroke can hang on it. The usual advice from people who quote this work is to add a 15% cushion, because a repower almost always turns up one more problem sitting right next to it. If you are looking at a bigger tri-tune with twin engines, the numbers stop being talk on paper. Owners and dealers comparing quotes in April of 2026 put twin 225 horsepower Mercury Pro XS repowers with full rigging at $40,000 to $50,000 installed. So when does the bill land? The number the trade works from for a gas outboard is around 1,500 hours before a rebuild comes up. The average weekend owner puts 50 to 100 hours a year on an engine. Do that math and a well-cared-for outboard should last decades. Except that is the math for an engine that was looked after. The one on the used pontoon in front of you carries somebody else's service history, and you are buying that history without seeing it. And marine engines rarely wear out from old age. They fail from being ignored. Low hours on an older boat is not always good news, because barely used is how gaskets dry out, impellers harden, and rust works through a power head nobody opened. The hour meter gives you one number. It does not tell you which of those two boats you are standing in front of. The trade runs one comparison and only one. Take the price of the boat, add the installed repower cost, and set that total against the price of a similar boat that already has good power. If your version lands higher, you have paid extra for the right to do the work yourself. That is the math buyers are told to run. It is also not the whole story. And notice what that comparison quietly takes for granted. It assumes there is a supply of similar pontoons with good power sitting on the market at a sane price, ready to be lined up against for 20 years that held on its own. That is what broke. Because that explains one boat. It does not explain a market. One figure changes the shape of all of it. According to that same association's numbers published in January of 2026, the used market is about 80% of all boats sold in America each year. 80%. Used boats run this business now. The new boat lot is the sideshow. And the boats now flooding into it are boom-era pontoons reaching the same age at the same time. 5 to 7 years is when the vinyl needs replacing. 5 years is where the epoxy people found rotten plywood. Year 5 through 7 is where a 50-hour-a-year outboard starts running up repair bills. A whole generation of pontoons, sold in the biggest boat-buying years in decades, is arriving at its first big bill inside the same narrow window. And it lands in a market where new pontoon sales are down 12.5% and buyers are already nervous. If the timing were the only problem, this would still be something you could survive, but then there is what the factories put in writing. Quick note before that, if you want these numbers as they land, subscribe. This channel does not chase headlines, it reads the filings. By January of 2026, the company that owns the biggest pontoon brands in the country had already put the tell in writing. Polaris bought Boat Holdings in 2018 for $805 million, cash, bringing in Bennington, Godfrey, Hurricane, and Rinker. Boat Holdings was, in Polaris's own words, the largest maker of pontoon boats in the United States, doing roughly $560 million a year, and pontoons were the fastest growing thing in boating. Then look at the fourth quarter of 2025. Polaris reported marine sales of $138.3 million, up 1% on the year. Nothing dramatic on the top line. The margin line is the dramatic part. Gross profit margin. The slice of every sale the company keeps after building the boat fell to 14.4%, down from 17.3% in the fourth quarter of 2024. And the company's stated reason was mix, driven by higher sales of entry-level pontoon boats. Out of finance language, the company sold a greater share of its cheapest pontoons and made less on each boat that left the building. Polaris has not said its boats got worse, and the filing does not back that claim. The smaller point is the useful one. The weight of the pontoon business has slid toward the cheap end of the lineup, and the cheap end is where the plywood deck, the basic vinyl, and the base engine live. You can see the latter in the listings. On one builder's 2026 lineup, a center console fish Tritoon lists at $89,900, while a top-of-the-range model with twin Mercury Racing 500R engines lists at $319,900. Same brand, same model year, same basic build of tubes and deck. A pontoon brand is a price ladder. The used listing does not tell you which rung the boat came off. That matters more than it sounds. Two pontoons of the same length, year, and brand can sit side by side with a huge gap between what they cost new. Almost nothing in the listing photos will tell you which is which. The difference is in the thickness of the vinyl, the grade of the plywood, how many holes through the deck were sealed properly at the factory, and how much engine was hung on the back. 6 years later, all of that is invisible to the buyer and completely visible to the repair bill. And if the money were the only risk, this would still be something you could handle. But then there is the paperwork. Boat titles in this country run on 50 separate state systems. They do not agree with each other. Depending on which count you read, between 9 and 16 states do not require a boat title at all, and many others only require one above a certain length. Texas titles every boat with a motor, no matter the size. Its neighbors do not, and a lien, the legal claim a lender puts on a boat it financed, sticks to the boat and not to the seller. If the last owner financed that pontoon and never paid the loan off, the lender can take it out of your driveway even though you paid in full, in cash, with a signed bill of sale in your hand. In a state that issues boat titles, the lien is recorded there. On a Coast Guard documented boat, the mortgage is filed with the National Vessel Documentation Center and shows up on the abstract of title. But a boat can move between those two systems and between states, and a used pontoon sold privately in a no-title state can arrive with nothing but a bill of sale and a handshake. That same gap is how a boat written off after a storm in one state shows up months later with clean paperwork in another. No national system stamps a boat as storm damage the way one stamps a car. The history follows the hull only if somebody goes looking for it. Nobody at the boat ramp is raising any of that with you. The seller may not know it applies to him. Which brings us to the part that changes everything above it. Last June, a 30-foot Sun Tracker party barge sold on an open marketplace for $1,498.75. It had been listed at $5,995, that is 75% off. It was not a junker. The seller's own description called it excellent, said the deck was solid, said the seat vinyl was not torn, and noted the boat had been in the water a week earlier. It sold with no motor and no trailer. 30 feet of pontoon boat, $1,500. That is the market putting a price on a pontoon with the engine taken off. And once you have seen that figure, you cannot unsee it on any listing, because it means the asking price of a used pontoon is not a boat price at all. It is an engine price, with a boat attached to it for free. Which is why the used pontoon looks like a bargain. The cheap boat is an illusion. What you are buying is a used engine at a boat's price. The plywood deck comes free, clock already running, on aluminum tubes that were never the expensive part. That is the reason the $14,000 pontoon and the $18,000 repower quote sit on opposite sides of each other. It has almost nothing to do with the boat. You were haggling over the wrong thing the whole time. So who loses money on this? The seller who repowers before listing loses first. $18,000 goes into an engine, and the market prices the finished boat at engine price plus a deck, so most of that money never comes back. The smart money move is to sell the tired boat as a tired boat and let the next person carry it. The buyer who haggles over looks loses harder. Talk a seller down $800 over faded seats, feel good in the driveway, and take on an engine at 1,100 hours with no service records. The 800 you won is a rounding error against the 15 to 18,000 you just picked up without pricing it. Who wins? The buyer who does the opposite of what feels right and buys the newest engine sitting on the oldest tubes. Looks you fix on a schedule you control, and tubes almost never fail. The engine is the only part of a pontoon that can hand you a 5-figure bill in one phone call. And dealers already know this. Used pontoons get priced off the engine on the trade sheet, then handed to the buyer as a whole boat with a whole boat story attached. So do this before you make an offer on anything. Get the engine's year, model, horsepower, and hour meter reading from the seller in writing, by text, before you drive out. Then call a repower shop for an installed quote on that exact engine. Installed with rigging, not engine only. Take that number off the asking price. If what is left sits above what a similar pontoon with good power is listed for, you walk and you keep the 15 to 18,000. The number to hold in your head is 1,000 hours on a gas outboard. Past that, stop calling it a boat purchase. You are shopping for a repower with a boat around it. Every question that gets a seller to hand you those numbers, the hour limits by engine type, the lien and title search steps state by state, and the figures to take off before you make an offer, are in the complete boat buying guide. $27 at fleetwatchmanual.com. It turns everything you just heard into about 10 minutes of work standing next to the boat. The shops quote $15,000 to $18,000 to hang a new engine on a boat that already exists. There are pontoons listed today for less than that with the engine already bolted on. Both of those numbers are real, and only one of them is a bargain. The other cost nobody prices in is what it takes to keep the thing somewhere once you own it. Slip fees have been doing something strange this year, and that story is on screen right now.